I knew I was about to be blindsided the second Craig Lannon's voice cracked across the open floor plan like a cheap firecracker. He stood at the edge of my cubicle, red-faced and huffing like he just ran a mile in wingtips over a goddamn sandwich. "You're fired. That's misuse of company property," he spat, gesturing at the half-eaten roast beef I'd been chewing on like I'd just embezzled six figures through a hoagie. My mouth still full, I blinked twice, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Just 30 pairs of eyes peeking over monitors, pretending they weren't witnessing a grown man have an aneurysm over deli meat. Now, you'd think there was more to it, like I'd threatened someone or set fire to the server room. Nope, just a sandwich, left over from a canceled client meeting. One of six left in the break room fridge, unlabeled, unguarded, and as far as anyone with common sense could tell, free game. I'd even made a habit of wrapping them in napkins for the janitorial staff after hours. But this time, I was the villain. This time, Craig had a point to make, and that point was apparently sticking out the side of my rye bread with horseradish. 12 years. That's how long I'd been keeping the circus duct taped together. I ran operations like a war widow runs the church bake sale, calm on the outside, calculating disaster on the inside. Client files, vendor contracts, holiday logistics, IT outages, toilet paper restocks. I handled all of it. Quietly. Efficiently. No fanfare. No demands, and certainly no temper tantrums in front of the team over finger food. Craig was 3 months into his new role as VP of Operations, and you could already smell the Axe body spray of nepotism on him. He wasn't promoted because he was competent. He was promoted because his golf swing made the regional VP snort laugh over beers in Scottsdale. But I played nice. I trained him on our internal systems, walked him through workflows, even covered for him when he missed a compliance form that could have cost us a vendor. And this is how he repaid me. Fired over a sandwich. No write-up, no sit-down, no HR mediation. Just red-faced yelling and a call to security like I was hiding the Mona Lisa in my lunchbox. He even made a show of it, told me I was setting a dangerous precedent. Like I'd just declared martial law over ham and provolone. If you're wondering why someone would lose their entire grip on reality over a slice of roast beef, here's a hint. Guilt makes noise. And Craig had plenty. You see, 3 days earlier, Craig had emailed me at 11:43 p.m. asking me to retroactively approve a $27,000 executive morale dinner that was somehow billed to our internal wellness program. I flagged it, said it didn't align with our codes, said it would raise questions during the next audit. He replied, "Just get it done, Jennifer." I didn't. And that, my friends, was the real crime, not the sandwich, but the silence. My refusal to play along, to lie, to fix things, to clean up after yet another frat boy in a fitted suit pretending he understood how a balance sheet worked. And I wasn't about to start. Look, if you've ever had your career set on fire by a man who thinks networking is code for billing four figures on oysters while interns process returns, maybe hit that subscribe button. Really, most people forget, but it helps us keep the stories coming. Drop a like too. It lets the team know you're out there, and it sure as hell beats eating lunch alone in HR's holding cell. So I stood up, wiped my mouth, folded the sandwich wrapper like a flag at half-mast and placed it delicately in the trash. No tears, no pleading. I just handed Craig my ID badge, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "That was a damn good sandwich, Craig," and then I left. But before I walked out the door, I did one more thing. I sat down at the visitor kiosk and logged into my personal backup drive. Took 10 minutes. Uploaded everything. Emails, receipts, calendar entries, Slack threads. Screenshots of Craig's sushi lunches marked as strategic planning, his last-minute Vegas retreat disguised as a remote leadership summit, even the PDF of that $27,000 steakhouse bill labeled under employee engagement. Then I drafted a clean, clear, beautifully formatted whistleblower memo titled, "Craig Landon Expense Irregularities FY24, and I sent it, one click, straight to the Ethics Committee inbox. No CC, no flair, just a subject line, an attachment, and a whole lot of quiet rage. I walked out without looking back. The front desk guy offered me a mint. I took two. The thing about Craig? He didn't realize that people like me, people who stay late, clean up messes, remember your kid's soccer schedule, also notice the patterns. The irregularities, the lies, and sometimes, we write it all down. The silence after Craig's outburst lasted longer than it had any right to. You'd think someone had pulled a fire alarm or dropped their pants in the middle of the bullpen. He stood there, chest heaving, the crust of my sandwich still on his breath like it had personally offended his lineage. "That's misuse of company property," he barked again, as if repeating it louder would make it true. I stared at him. Everyone else stared at me. It didn't feel real, not at first. My brain tried to file it under Craig's usual Tuesday theatrics. But then I saw Linda from HR pop her head up like a meerkat, eyes darting between us. She had that look. The one HR people get when they realize the Titanic just hit the iceberg and someone's gonna have to document the drowning. "I'm going to need your badge," Craig said, now lowering his voice, trying to add gravitas, like a man firing a spy in a thriller movie. "Immediately, you violated company policy." I didn't say a word, just unclipped my ID from my lanyard and set it on the desk next to my coffee mug that read running on caffeine and compliance forms. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of the room and replaced with copy paper dust and shame. Jennifer. Follow up via email regarding your offboarding, Linda muttered, her face the color of dry printer toner. She didn't make eye contact. No one did. Even Mark from sales, who once told me I saved his ass during an RFP submission, pretended to be deep in a spreadsheet while his screen showed a paused fantasy football draft. I was fired, over a sandwich, but not really. This wasn't about lunch meat. This wasn't about office protocol. This was Craig scrambling. Craig flailing. Craig trying to toss a body overboard to distract from the smoke starting to pour from his own engine room. Because what I hadn't told anyone, not yet, was that 5 days ago, Craig had slid into my inbox with a favor. A nasty little request to retroactively approve a $27,000 steakhouse dinner he'd hosted for what he called executive development alignment. Problem was, that dinner happened during the week we had a mandatory expense freeze. Company-wide, I'd reminded him, gently, even included the internal memo from legal with the bold red no exceptions box. He told me just push it through, backdate if you need to. I'll take care of the paperwork later. I didn't, and that's when things shifted. His tone changed. He stopped copying me on emails, started using his assistant to route requests I'd usually handle, even forwarded a vendor invoice to procurement with my name scratched out in Sharpie and his written above it like we were passing notes in detention. So yeah, firing me over a sandwich, that was just theater. A panicked, desperate attempt to rewrite the story before someone else did. But the real kicker? HR backed it. Not with confidence, mind you. They tiptoed. Zero tolerance, Linda said, like she was reciting a bedtime story she didn't believe in. Misuse of resources, potential perception issues, and in food hygiene. Food hygiene. They hit me with food hygiene like I'd snuck in a raccoon and fed it shrimp cocktail in the boardroom. I nodded, still said nothing. Just gathered my things, my water bottle, my backup chargers, the little post-it notes with Wi-Fi passwords and printer codes only I seem to remember. I left the framed picture of my dog. Figured Craig could stare into its judgmental eyes while he tried to expense another round of surf and turf under team building. No exit interview. No thank you for 12 years of stability. Just the soft beep of the badge scanner as I walked past reception and out into the parking lot. Funny thing is, you'd expect fury or tears. Maybe some dramatic scream in the elevator, one last cathartic screw you all, but I felt none of that. What I felt was focus. Stillness, like the moment right before a big storm when everything holds its breath. I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes just watching the building, wondering how long before it started to eat itself from the inside, because it would. They'd made me the villain, but they forgot something important. Villains keep receipts. The first 2 days felt like swimming in molasses. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not my trivia group, not even my dog walker, who probably noticed I was suddenly home to hand her cash face to face instead of leaving it in the ceramic frog on the porch. I just floated. Woke up at 6:30 out of habit. Made coffee like I had somewhere to be. Stared at my inbox like it owed me an apology. Then sat at the kitchen table and scrolled job boards that all screamed, "We're like a family," which, given recent events, felt more like a threat than a promise. I almost wrote an email to HR. Almost drafted one. Something stern, something citing policy, tenure, and the absence of any formal write-up process. I even considered a lawyer. But as I sat there, rereading the words, watching my cursor blink like it was judging me, something shifted. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't about one ridiculous, humiliating outburst over a sandwich. This was about a man who panicked because he thought I was a liability. Because I didn't nod and smile and just get it done. Because I said no. And he couldn't afford that kind of no, so I deleted the draft, and I opened another folder. I've always kept records, not out of paranoia at first, but because no one ever remembered the things I did. I was the one who forwarded critical approvals at 9 p.m., the one who kept screenshots of vendor confirmations, scanned receipts, and those weird flagged emails that everyone else deleted once the project wrapped. I didn't keep them to hurt anyone. I kept them because one day I might need to protect myself. That day had arrived. I opened my external hard drive, the one with the 2009 taxes sticker that had nothing to do with taxes. There it was. Every audit trail Craig had touched in the last 6 months. Inflated catering orders labeled working lunch that were somehow billed to departments that didn't exist. The spa invoice with an attached note from Craig, wellness retreat, don't ask. The time he tried to get a $4,800 sushi dinner approved under client onboarding, even though there were no new clients that month. I had it all, including the steakhouse dinner, $27,000, 12 people, one night, billed the day after the expense freeze went live. And best of all, the email chain, his request, my response, his follow-up, don't worry, legal won't see it, my refusal, click, saved. I started compiling, not angrily, not with vengeance, just cold surgical precision. Built a spreadsheet with receipts cross-referenced against budgets. created timelines, annotated approvals, attached screenshots, PDFs, date-stamped communications. It took 5 hours. I didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't shower. Just poured every grain of truth into one polished, ironclad report. I titled it, Craig Landon Expense Irregularities FY24 No Dramatics. No frills, just fact after fact, laid out like dominoes with the first one already tipped. Then I opened the internal ethics portal. The one they remind us exists once a year during Compliance Week, right before giving everyone branded stress balls and pretending the VP who drinks at lunch isn't real. The portal was ugly, outdated, probably hadn't been updated since Obama's first term, but it worked. I filled in my information, checked the box for confidential submission, uploaded the file. No final words, no grand declarations, just a blinking confirmation that read, "Your report has been received." And with that, I closed my laptop, exhaled, and sat back in the chair that still smelled like burned coffee and dry shampoo. Not angry, not sad, just still. I knew what Craig would do. He'd scramble, he'd lie. He'd spin a narrative where I was bitter, unstable, not a team player. He'd throw around words like disgruntled and poor fit. HR would look the other way, the same way they did when he called the intern sweetheart in meetings and bragged about expensing bottle service in Phoenix. But this time, I'd already made my move, and it was silent. The first sign something was rotting from the inside out came 3 days after I hit send. A buddy of mine from IT, well, more like a hallway acquaintance who used to steal my peppermints, forwarded me a screenshot. No context, just the subject line of an internal email. Urgent compliance request, FY24 expense documentation. Sent from the new CFO's office. CC'd to legal. BCCs? Who knows? Probably God. By day 5, the vultures were circling. Craig was scrambling. I knew it before I even heard the details. The man couldn't tie his own shoelaces without forwarding the calendar invite. The moment someone in finance asked for master ledger, I guarantee he was in his office sweating through his Banana Republic slim fit. Rumor had it he started pulling interns into his glass-walled corner like they were enemy spies. One even cried in the stairwell after being accused of failing to attach proper approval chains to wellness expenditures. Translation: Craig was deleting receipts and praying no one noticed the gaps. But people noticed. Oh, did they notice? Finance flagged a $14,000 charge coded under strategic alignment that turned out to be a tequila-fueled boat party with 3 executives and a guy named Dingo from procurement. Boat rental alone was more than my monthly mortgage, and there were pictures posted publicly. Craig tagged, shirtless. Then came the spa invoice, the one with a note that said Team Detox but was billed on a Sunday and only included Craig and 2 women from a consulting firm no one had ever heard of. HR tried to explain it away as holistic morale building. Compliance was less poetic, they flagged it. Hard. Craig, meanwhile, went full conspiracy mode, started emailing department heads with clarification memos. Let's align our narrative on the recent Q2 hospitality initiatives, he wrote, like this was some wartime propaganda and not just corporate receipts with lies stapled to them. People got nervous, real nervous. One junior analyst apparently got thrown under the bus for forgetting to itemize a breakfast Craig had ordered on his hotel room tab. The analyst was 22. The breakfast, 3 lobster omelets and a Bloody Mary flight. Word spread, fast. HR updated my file in the system. I wasn't terminated anymore. I had voluntarily resigned. Like I just got tired of doing my job with dignity and walked into the abyss for fun. Nice try, Linda. I still had the original email with effective immediately in the subject line and a direct quote from Craig about zero tolerance. But sure, voluntary. Like giving a mugger your wallet is mutual asset redistribution. What really got me, though, was the LinkedIn DM. Anonymous profile, no picture. Just a generic name and the message, "Thank you, that file was immaculate." I stared at it for a while. There was no doubt it came from someone inside, someone in the audit chain, probably finance, maybe legal, someone who'd spent the last 2 years watching Craig get away with gourmet murder while pretending to care about expense caps. Someone who'd read every page of my submission and realized I wasn't just bitter. I was right. I smiled. Then I got popcorn. Because by the end of that week, the whispers got louder. Something about an external compliance review. Something about missing documentation that predates the Q1 merger. Translation: the big audit was coming. And Craig, he was the centerpiece. Not because I said so, but because his paper trail had teeth marks, blood stains, and entire pages missing. It was all unraveling. And I didn't have to lift another finger. Just sit back, sip my tea, and watch the slow-motion train wreck from the comfort of unemployment. Angela Tran didn't come from the world of Cumbaya Company retreats or circle-back Slack threads. She came from a Big Four firm, had a stare like a laser cutter, and believed in one thing above all: the math. No charm, no golf invites, no quarterly vision decks could distract her from what the numbers said. And the numbers? They were starting to smell like shrimp left too long in a filing cabinet. Her first move was clean and simple. A full audit of all FY24 non-salary expenditures, starting with departments that had outpaced their quarterly discretionary budgets by more than 30%. Guess who landed at the top of the list like a gold medalist in Olympic fraud? Craig Landon, VP of Operations, proud owner of a $250,000 line item labeled Executive Development Events. Angela flagged it, dug deeper, found out the term executive development had been used to categorize everything from catered oyster towers to private room karaoke tabs. There were no development outcomes listed, no post-event reports, not a single line of justification except the same one-word excuse typed again and again in lowercase like a desperate whisper: team building. Then came the second flag. A termination report from Craig's division. My name on it. The reason? Theft, not of money, not of property, but food, a sandwich to be exact. Angela raised an eyebrow, pulled the report. Read Craig's wording: repeated misuse of company resources, consuming reserved client assets without approval. Then she flipped to the invoice Craig had approved the same week for a $4,350 lunch for pre-deal nourishment that included 16 orders of filet mignon sliders and 12 bottles of sparkling rosé. She made a note. A simple one: investigate inconsistency. By the time the internal audit team dug into Craig's food-related expenses, they needed a damn forklift. Over $500,000 in catering. $500,000, buried in vague descriptions like leadership alignment session, strategic digestion, and my personal favorite, cognitive fuel activation. Some invoices didn't even list items, just flat charges with line notes like meal experience for 10 or client taste journey. They weren't coded correctly. They weren't approved by legal. In some cases, they weren't even fully itemized. But they'd all been signed by Craig. Jennifer's termination, once a footnote, now became a question mark, and Angela didn't like question marks. She requested access to the ethics portal, found my report, opened it. Page after page of cross-reference transactions, with Craig's notes circled in red and matching timestamps pulled from vendor emails, procurement logs, and the billing dashboard no one thought I had access to. And there, clipped to the top of the file, was a note from me: termination reason does not match expense history. Recommend full review. Angela didn't smile. She wasn't the smiling type, but she did pause, closed the folder, picked up the phone, and told her internal team in a voice like ice sliding down steel, get me every food-related transaction Craig Landon touched, now. And that's when the real fun began, because silence, that's a kind of power. While Craig fumbled to find someone else to blame, while HR massaged timelines and compliance blinked into the void, I said nothing. I didn't post about it, didn't send angry emails, didn't beg for my job back. I'd already done everything I needed to do. One folder, one file, one sandwich. And now Angela Tran, the human audit hurricane, had her eyes locked on Craig's ledger, and she was hungry. Craig made his first mistake the moment he tried to rewrite history with a smirk and a PowerPoint. At the internal review meeting, what he called a clarification session and Angela Tran called round one, he slid into the room with his blazer half-buttoned and his talking points loaded like blanks in a starter pistol. His opening line: it's unfortunate this whole thing started with one employee's misunderstanding of policy. Misunderstanding. He was referring to me. He'd already started crafting his narrative to the board, that I was a bitter, entitled legacy employee who had trouble adjusting to new leadership dynamics, that I'd become increasingly difficult to manage and resistant to cultural change. HR had even found an old anonymous survey response that mentioned friction with the new VP team. Craig highlighted it like it was a smoking gun instead of an overcooked marshmallow. He spoke in corporate koans, throwing around phrases like scaling trust and emotional capital, none of which meant anything when Angela opened the spreadsheet. See, while Craig talked, Angela was pulling receipts, literally. She cross-checked timestamps, pulled vendor logs, matched calendar invites to expense forms, and that's when she found it: the steakhouse dinner, the infamous $27,000 executive morale outing. Craig had submitted it as a March event. The dinner happened in April. Specifically, 2 days after the company-wide expense freeze went into effect. Angela flipped the page of the report, clicked a tab, and up came the emails, mine and Craig's, his request at 11:43 p.m., my response at 7:02 a.m. the next day, his follow-up casually asking me to backdate it so it doesn't get stuck in the legal loop, my refusal. Angela didn't raise her voice. She just swiveled the screen slightly toward HR. Would you consider this a misunderstanding of policy? HR said nothing. Craig started shifting in his seat, tugging his sleeve, talking faster. Look, Jennifer's documentation is impressive, sure, but it lacks context. You have to understand her role wasn't to question leadership, it was to support it. Angela didn't blink. So when she refused to falsify a date on a restricted expenditure, that was her failing? Craig opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because by then, the ethics committee had already requested his login records, and what those showed was damning. Craig had accessed the internal audit platform 4 separate times in the past 2 months, without any assigned tasks or scheduled audits. One session aligned perfectly with a deleted email thread between him and a boutique seafood caterer billing $9,100 for Product Vision dinner, attended solely by Craig and two golf buddies. The deletion timestamp matched to the minute. Worse yet, someone had tried to retroactively adjust the metadata on an approval PDF, replacing my initials with his own. Unfortunately for Craig, I don't just save receipts. I name them with version logs, every file, every invoice. Every internal form I touched had a mirrored backup, date-stamped and stored in a personal archive. When Angela presented this, she didn't look at Craig. She looked at the room. This, she said, tapping the folder marked JLETH0424. PDF is the gold standard of internal documentation. If every operations coordinator worked with this level of integrity, we wouldn't need half the audit team we have. And just like that, the room shifted. It wasn't about Craig's charm anymore. Wasn't about who laughed at his dumb happy hour jokes or who owed him favors from some golf trip in Tucson. Now it was about data. Facts. The spreadsheet didn't care about his title. And my silence, it was finally louder than his voice. The day the external auditors showed up, the air in that building got weird. You ever walk into an office and instantly feel like the walls are holding their breath? That's what it was. No casual morning chatter. No how was your weekend over microwaved oatmeal. Just silence, heavy and unnatural. Like the building itself knew something ugly was about to surface. Craig tried to play it cool. Routine stuff, he told his assistant Lacey, while waving his hand like he was swatting a fly made of subpoenas, probably checking up on some post-merger alignment metrics. But Lacey, poor thing, looked like she'd been locked in a haunted spreadsheet all weekend. Puffy eyes, nails chewed to the quick. She'd spent the last 72 hours trying to match receipts to calendar invites, scouring Outlook for any thread that would make the $500,000 in executive development meals look like anything but fraud on a crusty platter. And she was failing. Because here's the thing about lies, especially expense lies. They don't age well. The food gets cold. The stories don't match. The calendar betrays you. Angela Tran arrived 5 minutes before the board meeting. No laptop bag, no coffee, just a thick black binder clutched under one arm like a weapon. The cover was printed in stark Arial font, all caps. Executive expenses Craig Landon. She didn't say a word in the hallway. Just walked through like a shark in a suit, ignoring Craig's forced smile and half-wave. She didn't even look at him. And that made him sweat. They gathered in conference room B, which everyone called the icebox because the AC never worked right and the glass walls offered no shelter from public shame. Executives filed in. Board members logged into Zoom. Someone handed out packets. Craig sat at the far end of the table, trying to do that thing where he leans back like he's not afraid, like he has nothing to hide. But his fingers wouldn't stop tapping. Angela placed the binder on the center of the table. She didn't open it, she didn't explain. Simply laid it down, thud, and walked around to the head of the table where the CFO was seated. And there it was, clipped to the very top, my termination report. The same flimsy, typo-ridden excuse Craig had whipped up to make it seem like I'd committed some great act of sandwich espionage. Only now, it was paperclipped to a printed receipt from the $27,000 steakhouse dinner, dated during the expense freeze. The room froze. The CEO frowned, flipping the top pages with deliberate fingers. Angela finally spoke. I've compiled a full audit of discretionary spending under Mr. Landon's authority for fiscal year 24. We've identified a pattern of miscategorization, backdated approvals, and inappropriate allocations totaling over $500,000 in food and entertainment expenses. Craig let out a short laugh. Tried to inject some charm. I think we're exaggerating here. You know how these things go? Sometimes entries get misfiled. Vendors use different codes Angela didn't look up. 6 of the vendors used identical phrasing in their item descriptions. Executive morale enhancement. That wording isn't standard. It appears to have been copy-pasted from Mr. Landon's initial invoice template. Then she turned the page and handed the binder to the CFO. The CFO, a quiet man with little tolerance for drama, read silently for a full minute. Then his gaze landed on Craig. And you fired someone over a sandwich? Craig straightened. That employee was exhibiting a pattern of behavior. It wasn't just about the food. Angela raised an eyebrow. Then why did your report only mention the sandwich? No prior write-ups, no HR records, no formal warnings. Just one line, misuse of company property, unauthorized food consumption. Someone near the end of the table chuckled under their breath, quickly turned it into a cough. Craig was turning red now. Lacey wouldn't meet his eyes. Angela closed her copy of the binder with a quiet snap. There are 15 flagged receipts in this report, all filed under vague codes, none tied to measurable business outcomes. The earliest is from 2 weeks after your promotion. The latest, last month. Every single one approved by you, many without secondary authorization. The CEO folded his hands. The whistleblower who submitted the original documentation, are they still employed? Angela glanced at me, not directly, but just enough that Craig's shoulders tensed. Then she replied flatly no. They were terminated for eating a leftover sandwich from a canceled meeting. Value $7.84, and then no one spoke. Craig shifted again, reached for his water, missed the coaster. The binder sat there like a tombstone, and Craig was already buried. The room had gone from icebox to autopsy table. No one touched their coffee. No one shifted in their seats. They just watched as the lead external auditor, an older woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like brittle granite, held up two sheets of paper like they were from two different dimensions. Page 1, my termination form. Black and white, short, clinical. Unauthorized consumption of client-designated assets. Employee terminated for cause. Zero tolerance. Page 2, a scanned receipt for a $14,800 seafood tower order. Description, team bonding executive tier. Signed, Craig Landon. No client listed, no department attached. She placed both sheets down in front of the board. This, she said calmly, tapping my termination, was processed in under 12 hours. HR, legal, and operations signed off with no dispute. Then she tapped the shrimp tower. This was billed under a department that doesn't exist anymore. There is no client file, no event record, no notes, no approval chain. The CFO leaned forward and laced her fingers. In fact, she said slowly, of the 116 food-related expenses submitted under Craig Landon in FY24, only 6 had full documentation. 22 were filed with date discrepancies. 9 were retroactively categorized, and 1 she paused. Pulling a final sheet from the binder, was logged as mandatory morale injection and charged to the Q3 DEI budget. Craig cleared his throat. Okay, some of those were obviously clerical issues. Miscommunications, vendor input errors. This is being wildly misinterpreted. You fired someone, the CFO cut in over a sandwich. The words hit like a hammer. Flat. Inevitable. And yet, she continued, holding up a printout of the whistleblower submission. That same person provided a full ledger, with dates, attachments, vendor emails, and flag notes on every questionable transaction for the past 8 months. Most of which, she added with a faint shake of her head, we couldn't retrieve from your system because someone purged 3 months of archived receipts from your folder the week after the termination. One of the board members, Raymond, I think, the guy who never said anything unless he was voting against new initiatives, murmured under his breath, you fired someone over a sandwich while billing us $500,000 in shrimp towers? Another board member cracked a laugh, a real one. He tried to stifle it, but it was too late. The crack in the dam had started. A few snorts, a smirk or two. One of the assistants outside the glass wall bit her knuckle to keep from reacting. Craig's face drained. Gone was the lean-back casual confidence. Gone was the blazer jacket cool. He looked like a man sitting in a chair that might collapse if he breathed wrong. I was told this was just a review, he said, trying to smile, that we were looking into broader patterns. Angela, didn't we agree? Angela didn't even look up. She simply turned a page in the binder and pushed it forward. Would you like to explain this one? Strategic Energy Lunch, $6,400, no attendees listed. Craig opened his mouth, closed it. The CEO, who'd been silent for 20 minutes, finally leaned forward. Who approved all of this? It was flat, no anger, just exhaustion. Craig tried. God, he tried. The systems were loose, post-merger chaos. There were process gaps. We were told to move fast, adapt, maintain morale in the sandwich, the CFO asked, one eyebrow raised. Craig said nothing. Angela flipped one final page, a picture. Me sitting at my desk, eating the sandwich, taken by security cam. Time-stamped? The same day Craig submitted a $9,100 lunch for regional partnership development, despite no regional partners being on site. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was strategic. It let the weight of it all settle in. The binders, the invoices, the justifications, the sandwich, and the quiet proof that the person he'd thrown under the bus had built the road. There was no shouting, no pounding of fists, no impassioned last-minute plea from Craig about loyalty or misunderstanding, or how he did it all for team morale. Just silence. The kind that seeps in when the air gets too heavy with truth. The lead auditor shut the binder. The sound of it echoed through the boardroom like a gavel. She didn't make a speech. She didn't need to. She just looked at the CEO, nodded once, and said, our recommendation is immediate termination of Mr. Landon's employment, effective today. The formal referral to external counsel for fraud review. The volume and consistency of manipulated data warrants escalation. Craig sat motionless, staring straight ahead at nothing. His face had the stiff, waxy pallor of someone trying not to pass out. HR didn't speak either. Linda, who'd once told me I was too intense for mid-tier ops, quietly stood from her chair and walked around to Craig's side. She held out her hand. Wordless, open palm. He looked at her, then at the CEO. The CEO didn't move, didn't blink, didn't say his name, just slowly closed his leather notebook like a priest folding his hands at the altar of bad decisions. Craig reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out his badge, set it down. One soft plastic clink on the table, that was it. The auditor packed her things. Angela began stacking papers. Legal whispered to the CFO, who nodded once and stood. Everyone began to move. Quietly, businesslike. Like it had already happened a week ago and they were just cleaning up the mess. And then, right before people filtered out the door, just as the chairs began to scrape and the tension started to break like glass underfoot, Angela spoke. Soft, casual, but deadly. By the way, she said, almost offhand, like she was commenting on the weather, she labeled every receipt. Even the ones Craig said were misplaced. The whole room stopped, like someone pressed pause on the moment. No one said my name. They didn't have to. Every person in that room knew who she was. The same woman Craig had fired for eating a sandwich. The same woman who had quietly, meticulously documented every shady dollar while the rest of them were too busy cashing in catered favors and pretending not to notice the rot. Angela's eyes didn't move. She just slid her folder back into her bag and walked out. And the boardroom stayed frozen, even the ones who'd laughed before, even the ones who thought it was just corporate politics. Because in that moment they understood, the sandwich wasn't the scandal. The scandal was thinking that was all it was. An hour later, I was sitting in a corner booth at my favorite coffee shop, the one where the seats are cracked and the Wi-Fi's spotty, but no one ever rushes you out. I had my tea, my laptop, a front row seat to poetic justice. The stock price had dipped 3.4% since the board meeting. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to cause murmurs in Slack channels and tense phone calls with regional leads. I watched the ticker crawl across the screen like a quiet apology. And then, ping, LinkedIn, message request. Hi Jennifer, we've been following your work for a while. We're looking for someone to lead our compliance research for 2025. Interested in a conversation. A consulting firm, not massive but reputable. People first, transparent pay bands. The kind of place where labeling receipts wouldn't be seen as neurotic but necessary. I didn't reply right away, just let the moment stretch. Sipped my tea, watched the world tilt just slightly back toward balance. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled, not big, not loud, but real. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.